If people don't already know, France is having huge protests right now regarding the new proposition that Macron has enacted. So I believe it's not in law yet, but it's being proposed. So this would increase the retirement age from 62 to 64, so a 2-year difference. This is causing big uproar because a lot of people are already seeing Social Security or their version of Social Security in France as a way to steal money from the people. See, when you have Social Security, it's not a voluntary opt-in program. It's not like you check a box when you're 18 and you get to decide if you want to keep that 20% on your paycheck and fund different activities or save it or invest it however you want. But the government is forcefully taking it out from your paycheck and putting it into a bucket, which is really not a bucket that they're holding on for you and matching with inflation. They almost never match it with inflation, but it's not a bucket. They just appropriate it to the general funds, and the government spends those funds. In fact, they spend more than they can afford. So a lot of these nations take on extra debt, which costs the taxpayer even more money. And by the time you hit retirement age, the money that you're receiving is not matching the money that you put in. Now, it's also estimated that specifically in the United States of America, around 2030, 2033, something of that nature, there is going to be a certain reserve of the Social Security fund where they will have to cut benefits by 20-30%. So that's going to be a huge detriment to the people who are in their 60s, 70s, 80s, and so forth, because they're on fixed income. When you're on fixed income, you are depending on the state. If you haven't set up your life in a certain direction, you're depending on the state for a paycheck to fund your lifestyle, to fund your living. So basic expenses, gas, eggs, food, your living, if you're living at a house, apartment, whatever it is, you're depending on that paycheck, that fixed income, which is also, like I said, not matching inflation. So you have inflation going up. You have your rent is going up because property is going up. Assets are appreciating over time. You have food costs going up due to inflation. So at a certain point, a lot of these retirees have to take on part-time work. Now, what happens if you're not able to take on that part-time work? What happens if you have dementia, Alzheimer's? You're older, you can't move as well. A lot of companies are not going to hire you if you're 70 or 80 years old because you don't have the cognitive ability or the certain requirements that they're looking for that specific job to produce output. So the biggest thing here is we need to start questioning our governments. Why is this not an opt-in program? Why can we not voluntarily decide, hey, yeah, I should probably take 20% of my money. I don't really know how to save or invest, so I'm going to give that will to the government, and the government will do my bidding for me, however they will do it, which typically is not competent most of the time. And then you have another subset of the population, perhaps a minority, 15 to 20%, which say, I want to keep that 20%. I want to use that 20% of my paycheck to invest in a business, to invest in the stock market, to do my due diligence. And there is risk to that, right? In a entrepreneurial nation like the United States of America, there is risk for trying, but there's also reward. And you will have to see, it's always a competition between yourself, but also other people out there. You're seeing, is your strategy, is it going to succeed? What are you going to learn from it? And you fall down, you get up, and you try again. So if you're not willing to take on that risk, you can opt in. If you want to take that risk, you opt out. But the government is forcing you, because if you don't comply, if you don't pay your taxes, what happens? Okay, you may get some letters at first with the IRS, but after a certain period of time, you're going to have special agents come to your door, and you're going to have some criminal charges that are incurred on you because you're not abiding by the government's rule of law. And so we also know, and now I'm using the Constitution here, I know this is in France, but the Constitution should be a precedent for all nations because it's such a valuable proposition when it comes to individual rights. And being taxed without representation, or being taxed unjustly and unfairly, or having your money that Congress spends, because Congress approves all the spending bills, having your money being spent in certain entities or funding certain foreign wars that you do not condone, and then when you ask for the itemized list of where the expenses are going, you have a ton of Democrats and some Republicans, but mostly Democrats, who are saying, oh, we don't want to know where the money is going. Just, we're going to fund the war. The money's going to go to X, Y, and Z. You guys don't need to know. We don't need to know what the itemized list looks like for the expenses. Why do even our elected politicians not want to know what the itemized list is? Why can we not see, oh, we gave 10 Black Hawk helicopters over there, we gave, certain 20 Abrams tanks over here, this is the price, oh, we lost track of this money. There's a lot of funneling of cash that goes on, and if you give a centralized authority more and more power, and by power in this scenario, it's resources, because we're giving them our money that we've worked hard for, and they want to tax us more and more, they're going to take that money, and it's not coming from them, right? They're taking the money from we the people. They take the money, they say that they're going to help us by funding certain programs, then they bankrupt the programs. And then when we need our money back in the form of a check 50 years later when we're retiring, and they keep increasing the retirement age, which makes appropriate sense because we are living longer, but they adjust the retirement age and they give us only a fraction of the money that we had initially earned 50 years prior. That's a big problem. That's not just. That's not fair. That's not right. And that is a degradation of our rights. So if we're just removing the ethics and the morality of this, that is not serving our individual rights, because you're stealing money from us and you're not even giving the entire amount back to us. And so if we look at it from the government's point of view, they can see, well, we can just tax the people, take their money, put it in our certain funds and fund X, Y, and Z, whatever we need to, take on debt to pay the current Social Security beneficiaries. And we may have to cut their benefits a little bit. Maybe we fudge the CPI numbers so it looks like we're matching inflation, but we're really not. And they can actually see it. The beneficiaries can see that the amount they're receiving is not enough to fund their lifestyle, but they don't really have enough power to fight back against the federal government. This is like an interest-free loan to the government. It's actually worse than an interest-free loan, but it's like an interest-free loan to the government where they can just siphon off money. They can increase the taxes. There's a lot of propositions to increase the Social Security and Medicare taxes, and we never get anything back for it. And so a lot of this does not make logical sense. You can have these programs. By the way, our welfare programs are the largest programs. We spend the most money on them in the United States. I would presume in most other nations as well. And a lot of people like to think, well, at least we're getting free education, free healthcare, free type of insurance, like free retirement insurance would be Social Security. But it's not really free because it's coming from you, the taxpayer, and that's robbing you of your current opportunity for a future result that is not guaranteed. You should be able to make that decision on your own, whereas the government is coming in and saying forcefully, if you do not comply, we will put you in prison because you're not giving us your money. Now, you can have a basic level of taxation that is required just to fund infrastructure, to fund civilization around us. But when you go above and beyond with the welfare systems, it needs to be optional in a lot of sense. We can have a small safety net, but to be spending trillions of dollars, and a lot of this money is wasted. There's some good, right? If you have an older parent and they're using Medicare to be in a retirement home, that's something that you don't have to pay for because maybe you're not in a position, you make the average income 40, 50K in the United States. There's a positive there. But when it goes above and beyond, like we need to tax people an insane amount, and a lot of this money is going towards administrative costs or it's being funneled into other areas, that's the problem. When you have a centralized authority, and it's not like there's one person running the centralized government, right? You have all of our 538 elected officials, then you have unelected officials, you have a whole bureaucratic system behind this. And honestly, they don't really care about you as an individual. The tribe is no longer 1 to 200 people like it was 50,000 years ago. The tribe is over 300 million people. And so for any one individual or for any group of individuals to conceive that number, it's not a personal connection they have with you. So they're just taking money, then they see opportunity, and they're using that money with the opportunity. If they're held accountable, that's a different story. But more often than not, when you have people at the top and they understand how the psychology of the people at the bottom works, or not the bottom, but the majority of the people, they know that they can get away with a lot. They know that they can make false promises. They know that they can take 100 grand and give you back 20 grand and you'll be happy. And they'll come up with XYZ reason why they could only give you 20% of your money back. So it's not just about the unfair, unjust, forced taking of money, but it's also the lack of accountability. When you put these two things together, you get uproar. You get the equilibrium of society being thrashed against the wall. And they understand at the top level, if they're smart enough, to not break that equilibrium. So they understand the majority of people are just okay with it because they can make these changes gradually over time. They can make these authoritarian changes over time. And no one's going to wake up. No one's going to change anything. No one's going to say anything. You have the minority of the population come in, but do the minority of the population actually have enough power, influence, status, resources to make a difference for the majority of the people? That change is not as common as people would like to think, especially if we look at the historical context of these different revolutions, rebellion groups, which I'm not saying we should revolt or anything like that, but it's always a minority of the people who are actually protesting for a cause, and most of the time it never changes anything. But if more and more people wake up to this and they see It's not such a trivial matter that we're going from age 62 to 64. It's that we can't even opt out of the program. It's that our money is not really going to a bucket that is appropriated for us 50 years from now, and it's going to match inflation, whatever the inflation is 50 years from now. It's that our money is being funneled away, and we're not even guaranteed that money. And so the trust that we have in our institutions and our governments, that is being eroded away very quickly because we see all the quackery that's happening, not just behind the scenes, but right in front of our eyes.